Hi folks, Steve here, and I'm back with the first of two videos where I'll look at ways to paint rusted and weathered true metallic metal. So let's crack on. These miniatures that I'll be using today have been provided by BESTIARUM Miniatures, so thanks very much for that. And these are from the upcoming additions to the Penitent Crusade faction. So these guys with the big two-handed weapons are called Repentants, and there's some other chaps with long weapons and shields called Bulwarks. And the interesting thing about these minis as well is that they come in modular pieces, so the bodies, the heads, the arms and various bits separate pieces, so you can sort of mix and match them together, all the different bits, and they're quite posable, and they're also really good for kit bashing, like doing heads and arms and weapon swaps, because you're essentially getting all these little bits that you can play about with, and some cool little armoured bodies that you can make what you want with. So I'll definitely be having a go at that myself shortly as well, and playing around with them. I'm quite excited about getting to do that. But anyway, let's get on with the painting itself. And the first step, of course, is going to be priming the mini. So I'm going to use a black primer for this, and this is just my favourite primer, which is Vallejo Polyurethane Matte Black. And I've diluted it slightly, and I'm just getting this on with a brush, just doing it nice and quick. Could have used the airbrush if I wanted to, but I just didn't really fancy getting it out just to do this couple of minis. And so I'm going to give it 2 very thin coats with this primer and let that completely dry. A black base coat is always a great foundation for when you're painting with true metallic metals. It just helps them have that extra shine and vibrancy to them. But in this case, because I'm going to be doing quite a heavily rusted armour as well, I actually want to start it more from a very dark brown rather than outright black. So I'm adding a little bit of paint to my primer, and the paint I'm using in this case is Vallejo German black brown, Vallejo model colour, but any really dark brown that you have is absolutely fine. I'm going to mix it in about 50-50 and make sure I get a good coat all over the mini with this brown colour. Even the bits that we're not going to be painting metal, it doesn't really matter, we can go over them later, and it just helps unify everything at this stage. Now we can begin base coating the armour with metallic paint. And so to start with, I'm using gunmetal from Army Painter. This is a relatively dark metallic colour. If you only have one, or if you don't have a large selection of metallic paints, you can take any kind of silver metallic paint and you can add a little black to it to darken it down, and you can also go the opposite way as well and add a little bit of white to it to lighten it up for the later stages when we do highlights. So you really don't need a huge range of metal or silver style paints for this. Just whatever you have will do. Even if you only have the one paint, you can manage it. And so all I'm going to do is go all around the mini and give all the metal parts a solid base coat with this paint. If you do happen to hit anything else and go outside the lines, don't worry about it. We can just go back and cover that up with the black-brown mix that we had before. And so we're now going to start the fun part of this process, which is the glazing. So essentially with glazing, what we're doing is taking a paint and just thinning it down so that it's a very, very thin mixture. And what I'm using at the moment is the black-brown mix that I'd originally used as a base coat just after the prime. So you can see on my hand there that it's very, very thin. It's not actually completely covering my skin. You can see that it goes down into just the little crevices and whatnot on my skin. And that's exactly what we want when we're making a glaze like this. So it's probably maybe 4 or 5 parts water to 1 part paint, so it's very, very diluted. You could, of course, use a wash if you wanted to, something like Known Oil or Army Painter Dark Tone, something like that, if you have that to hand and you prefer it. I just like to work with diluted paints because I always have them to hand and it's simple and easy to use. And just using water with this as well, you can get various glaze mediums and things like that you can use for diluting paint. But if you don't have access to them, it's really not a requirement. As you can see here, I just use water straight out of my water pot all the way through this. So what I'm doing at the moment is getting this glaze of the black brown all over the parts that I've coloured with the metallic paint previously. And so you don't really need to be very careful with this. This is just a case of getting it onto the metallic elements. And this is just going to sink into the recesses and help set a bit of definition on the model. It's going to provide a bit of that sort of shading effectively on these metals. Like I said, you don't need to take too much care about it. Just be wary of any large significant pools. You don't want anything that looks like what are called coffee stains when people refer to it, when sometimes a wash will dry on the model and you just get this sort of unsightly stain. We will, funnily enough, be creating stains of our own in the next couple of stages. That's kind of how we're going to develop this rusted look. But it's best off not to have it with this darker colour. We want this to largely focus on the inner parts of the model and just give us that clear definition and shading to each metal part. Okay, so here's how the Mini's looking after it's had 2 coats of the black brown wash / glaze that we gave it. This is completely dry now and it's looking pretty good. It's got some nice definition on it. We could even leave it like that if we wanted and just completely paint the rest of the Mini and we'd be good to go. But we are going to keep going and add some rust to this and really dirty it up and weather it up. So the first paint that I'm going to start with is a Vallejo game colour paint called Leather Brown. This is very close in colour to the old Games Workshop colour Snakebite Leather. I'm not sure what the newer version will be, but there will be one if you use the Citadel paint range. Again, we're making this into a glaze, so it's going to be very thin again, 4 or 5 parts water to 1 part paint. And I'm going to apply 2 coats of this glaze. The first one is more of an all-over glaze that's just going to cover the metallic parts entirely. The second application I'm going to be a bit more focused, so I want to really cover 75% to half of each individual part of the model, and the parts that I want to focus on the most are those that are going into recesses and into what would be the darker areas of the model. So we're going to be getting a combination of a bit of shading, but we're also focusing the weathering on those deeper areas of the miniature. Now we have that base layer of grungy looking grime on the armour, so it's starting to look pretty cool. And so we're going to take it a step further now, and I'm taking an orange paint. This one is Vallejo model colour Fire Orange. Similar colours in the Citadel range might be Troll Slayer Orange or Fire Dragon Bright. I think there's a couple of different names for oranges these days. I'm not up to speed with them entirely, but something like that, some kind of brighter orange than what we had with the Leather Brown. And this, when we apply it, again we're working in a thin glaze, and I'm really going to start concentrating this to deeper recesses and places where the different armour plates touch each other and connect with each other. So we want this to be simulating some of the more built up areas of rust, the extreme sort of parts of oxidation. And so I'm going to go all around the model applying this, and I'll do that 2 times as well, so 2 applications of it, just to really make sure that colour builds up. As when you're working with transparent paints like this, when you're glazing, they'll look quite vibrant when you initially put it on the model, but as it dries, the water evaporates and the paint cures, you'll see that it does dull down quite a bit. So going over a second time afterwards can help make sure that it just doesn't lose its vibrancy entirely. And so after we've gone through that complete process, this is what we're left with. And it's looking pretty good, but what we're going to do now is actually go through all the steps that we've just done once more. That means I'll be starting off again with our original black-brown glaze wash mix, and once I've done a layer of that, I'll then move on again to the leather brown, and then finally I'll move on to the fire orange to add more of the rust colours in. And why would we do this? Well, when we're working with these very thin kind of acrylic paints, these transparent layers, the more layers we add, the more visual interest that we get, because we get layer and layer of texture that builds up, these patterns in the rust and the grime on it, and so it just really boosts the effect, and it looks really nice the more time and attention you put in. And you could keep doing it again and again and again if you were doing a character model or something quite high level for display or something like that, you can really repeat this process as many times as you want until you get the degree of weathering that you want, and it can be quite fun to do as well. Now we can move on to highlighting the miniature, and so what I'm going to do is take a lighter metallic colour than what I used for the previous base coat. Like I said earlier in the video, if you don't have a lot of different colours, then you can add white to your silver colour or your metallic colour, and that'll do the trick as well. And what we're doing is essentially edge highlighting. So if you've painted any Space Marines before, you'll be familiar with this. But we're not going to do it in as precise or as neat a manner as we would if we were doing, a colourful and bright, undamaged Space Marine. Because this is it's weathered, it's rusted, it's chipped, it's quite a grim, dark effect. I'm being quite scratchy when I apply the highlights, so I'm using the flat end of the brush, or the side of the brush I should say, rather than the end, and I'm running it along the straight lines and the edges to deposit the paint that way. And I'm also being a little bit, as I said, a little bit scratchy with it, and I'm occasionally just sort of tapping, dashing, drawing little lines and scratches. And really there's no quick way to do this. You need to just make your way all around the miniature and just pick out all those points on the armour. You can see I'm working on the sword at the moment, but if you look at the miniature itself, you can see where I've been catching the edges, focusing on some of the areas that would catch light, so the knee pad, breastplate, shoulder pads, the helmet, the sort of spikes on the elbows, things like that. Just work your way around, take your time, manoeuvre the mini if you need to help you get to the right spaces. And as I said earlier as well, if you do hit any of the places that aren't metallic, that's not a problem. We can go back and just coat them with the dark black brown that we had earlier, so that makes that stage nice and simple as well. If you're not too confident with your edge highlighting, or if you simply want a quicker result, maybe you've got a whole army to paint or something like that, then you can absolutely dry brush the highlight on. You get a slightly different effect. It's not going to be as precise, and you do have to be careful when dry brushing metallic paints because the metallic pigments tend to be bigger. They're sort of metallic flakes suspended in the medium. And so if you do dry brush and you kind of overdo it, then you will start to get actual texture build up on your miniature from the flakes of paint. So do be careful when you're doing that. You're best off just using a small amount of paint and making sure that your dry brush is slightly damp, and you can actually just sort of tap your brush lightly against the mini rather than using a regular sort of quite strong dry brush stroke. Just use a gentle tapping motion to deposit paint, and it's always better to do it sort of slowly because you can go back and you can apply more if you want. It's very difficult to take it off to go in the other direction. Okay, so we've been through all the steps and now here's what we're left with, and I think this is looking pretty cool. The only thing I'm going to do is just touch up the blade of his sword a little bit. So although it is his primary weapon and you would assume he'd take some sort of care with it, I do want to just boost that rust a little bit again because it's kind of been toned back a bit when I was putting the highlights on. And so this just demonstrates again how you can take this process and you can reapply it until you're happy. You can go back to whichever stage that you want, even back to the original black brown wash that we did, and just go from there until you're happy with the result that you have. So that's the end of this video really. Hope it's useful and hope you enjoyed it. If you do get any use out of it, then please leave me a comment and let me know. I always enjoy hearing about that. Otherwise, thanks very much for watching and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.